I would like to welcome everyone again on behalf of the U.S. Department of State to our inaugural Student Foreign Policy Symposium. We are excited to host this session to provide an overview of careers within the Diplomatic Security Service. My name is Isabel Romero. I am the president of the Hispanic Employee Council of Foreign Affairs Agencies. I also serve as a security program officer in the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, and I cover countries in the Western Hemisphere, including posts in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. I would like to introduce one of our senior Hispanic leaders, Carlos Matus. Carlos Matus is a special agent with the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. He is currently serving as the first Hispanic Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and the Director of the Diplomatic Security Service. DS is responsible for leading worldwide security and law enforcement efforts to advance U.S. foreign policy and safeguard U.S. national security interests. Mr. Matus is a 34-year veteran of the Department of State, a career member of the Senior Foreign Service with the rank of Minister Counselor, and has served in over 17 domestic and overseas assignments. Over to you, Carlos.
Oh, thanks, Izzy. It's great to hear from you again. Look, I'm pleased to provide the opening remarks for the State Department's inaugural Student Foreign Policy Symposium, Esperanza, for the next diverse generation of foreign policy leaders. That's all of you. I want to thank the event's host, the Department's Bureau of Global Public Affairs, and the Hispanic Employee Council of Foreign Affairs Agencies, or HECFA, as we call it. Look, we're here today to commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month, as well as recognize the achievements of the Department's Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx employees. Yet, there's a lot more work to be done to ensure that the department, and specifically the Diplomatic Security Service, reaffirms and expands its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility for our existing and future personnel. I'm hoping that many of you students in the audience will consider taking the steps to join the ranks of the Diplomatic Security Service or the State Department, and you'll learn a little more about that later in this program. So DSS, as we call it, is the Law Enforcement and Security Bureau of the U.S. Department of State. Our mission is pretty simple. We lead worldwide security and law enforcement efforts to advance U.S. foreign policy and safeguard national security interests. That's pretty heavy stuff. It takes a large team of DS special agents, security engineers, security technical specialists. We have diplomatic couriers to support our mission. All of our personnel in these categories are foreign service personnel. Additionally, we rely on direct civil servants, contractors, foreign service, locally engaged staff, and others to support our mission around the world. Look, in short, we're recruiting. And so what type of people do we want? We want qualified individuals who represent the diversity of not only our organization and the United States, but also the diversity found throughout the world. My family is one example of the DS's commitment to diversity. I come from a very large and loving family. I was the first of three Matus brothers to join the Diplomatic Security Service as special agents. All three of us have enjoyed long, successful, fulfilling careers and have taken us all over the world. Look, I'm proud to say that DSS is in fact one of the premier bureaus in the State Department in its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We were the first ones of the bureaus in the State Department to form its Council for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility, and the first one to create and fill a dedicated position to focus on these matters, our own Diversity and Inclusion Officer. During the last year alone, we led more than a dozen events with leadership involvement and in partnership with the department and employee affinity groups and organizations. And during those sessions, DS leaders, personnel, and invited guests addressed issues concerning underrepresented groups. We also celebrate the diversity of our organization through social media, articles, and events honoring Pride Month, Hispanic American Heritage Month, HBCU Week, and other celebratory occasions. Our personnel come from a diversity of backgrounds and experiences. Our different cultural perspectives make us who we are. Our diversity is enhanced by the experiences we share with others from different educational, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds. Look, diversity isn't just a lip service for DSS, it's a requirement. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Izzy to moderate our discussion. Take care.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for taking the time to join us today. And I really especially love seeing you again since you participated in our Hispanic Heritage Month event 2 years ago. I am now going to turn over to Alberto Cruz so he can deliver some remarks regarding recruitment.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Alberto Cruz, and I'm a special agent with the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. I'm going to speak about career opportunities within DS. To begin, as Mr. Martus mentioned, the Bureau of Diplomatic Security is the law enforcement and security arm of the U.S. Department of State, and we operate both domestically and overseas. The following positions, as mentioned, are within the Bureau of Diplomatic Security: special agents, diplomatic couriers, security engineering officers, and security technical specialists. Special agents of the Diplomatic Security Service have a atypical mission. As sworn federal law enforcement agents, we conduct criminal investigations into crimes related to passport and visa fraud and personal security investigations. We are also responsible for the security and protection of the U.S. Secretary of State and visiting foreign dignitaries. While serving overseas, we are known as regional security officers, and we advise the U.S. ambassador on all security matters and manage a complex range of security programs designed to protect personnel, facilities, and information. Now, for those wondering if you require a law enforcement or a military background, you do not. You do need a bachelor's degree from an accredited university and must meet other requirements. Diplomatic couriers travel throughout the world to ensure the safe and secure transfer of diplomatic pouches containing classified and sensitive materials. Couriers spend most of their careers traveling, and they are assigned to regional officers and travel to embassies and consulates in their region. Now, for those of you with a electrical, technical, or engineering background, we have the security engineers and the security technical positions. Security engineering officers provide technical security support and engineering expertise to protect U.S. Foreign Service posts overseas and in domestic locations. Responsibilities include working with all aspects of security systems from design, development, and analysis to installation and testing. They also conduct security assessments for U.S. missions, conduct technical security, technical surveillance countermeasure inspections, implement computer security measures, and support dignitary travel. This position requires at least a bachelor's degree in physics and engineering from an ABET accredited program. Security technical specialists provide support and assist in worldwide technical security programs. This position only requires a high school diploma. However, you must demonstrate a specialized experience in electronics. All this information and more can be found on our careers.state.gov website. There you will find out more details regarding the job duties, requirements, and hiring process. Keep in mind that vacancies open at different times throughout the year, so we highly encourage you to register with us at careers.state.gov so that you can receive up-to-date information regarding vacancy openings related to the career of your choice. Currently, we are accepting applications for the security engineering officer position and the security technical specialist position. And remember, in the event that you are unsure whether you want to live overseas, but still want to pursue a career with the U.S. Department of State, you can find a variety of positions listed on the careers.state.gov website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alberto. I am so excited to introduce you all to our phenomenal panelists. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and to share their own diversity story, a little bit about their cultural heritage or background. Let's start with Maria.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Izzy and the panelists that I'm fortunate enough to share the time with this morning. And I also want to say thank you for tuning in to all of the students that are watching and hoping to learn a little bit about diplomatic security. So a little bit about me. I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and my father is from a small city in Colombia called Pereira, near Cali. And my mother is also from Bogota. And I was born there. We lived there for a few years, and then my whole family immigrated. So we left my entire father's and mother's family behind in Colombia. We lived throughout the United States. I grew up on the West Coast in San Diego, California. And at the age of 17, I joined the military. So I was in the US Army for 9 years. And then around that time, I became a police officer when I was 24 years old, so very early on. Throughout this time, I was able to finish my bachelor's degree in the course of military duty and my police officer work. And then I became a detective. So I started working narcotics cases, and because I was only allowed to speak Spanish at home with my parents. My dad didn't allow us to speak any English at home, and that ended up being very positive for me because I had the opportunity to become fluent in Spanish. And so when I became a police officer and working narcotics, of course, that was very beneficial because I was able to do a lot of undercover work as a detective working narcotics. So I worked police work for several years, and then finally I decided I wanted to travel and I wanted to seek out other opportunities in other areas. And so I applied to diplomatic security, and you fast forward and here I am several years later. I think I've been in now for 10 years. So my background being from Colombia, both parents, has provided me a lot of great opportunities, and the language, the cultural understanding, the historical knowledge, and all of that has been extremely beneficial for me throughout my career. And that's just a little bit about me. I think now I'm stationed here just south of DC. I'm in the Blackstone, Virginia area at our diplomatic security training center. And that's all for me. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you, Maria. We had a different upbringing. My parents were both immigrants, and actually at home, my dad was practicing English with us, so I didn't get to speak a lot of Spanish. I know we had opposite kind of background. I'll turn over now to Alberto to tell you about his background.
Hello again. As mentioned, I'm a special agent with the Bureau of Diplomatic Security and have been on the job for just over 10 years. I'm currently calling in from Bogota. I serve at the U.S. Embassy in Bogota. My past postings include the Office of DS Recruitment, U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, U.S. Embassy in Myanmar, the office in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and the New York Field Office. I'm a first-generation American. I was born in New York City to Puerto Rican parents. I'm very in the similar case as Maria. At home, spoke Spanish, and in school, spoke English. I hold a bachelor's degree in business and a master's degree in finance and accounting. Thank you.
Thank you. I am now going to turn over to Damaris.
Hi, good morning, Izzy. It's so nice to be here this morning, and I'm really excited. I love talking to students. There's just so much ambition out there right now, and it's always an honor to be with my DS colleagues on the panel. So a little bit about me. I grew up and I finished my undergrad on the island of Puerto Rico. So I have very strong ties there, still have family there. And I kind of was a different upbringing in terms that we did speak a lot of English, whereas I think most of the people you will come across from Puerto Rico mostly speak Spanish. So it was a bit different. Both parents from Puerto Rico, my grandparents all from Puerto Rico, come from a long line of Puerto Ricans. I studied chemical engineering on the island, chemical engineering degree. I have a master's in strategic intelligence, which I did at the State Department. State Department very graciously paid for my master's degree and paid me a salary while I was studying my master's degree. So again, lots of opportunities for higher education. I was the oldest of 6 children, which is in and of itself is a very probably traumatizing experience. But I don't know how my parents did it. They got all 6 of us through bachelor degrees. 3 of us have master's degrees, and one of them just finished their PhD. So there was always I think a push to be the best that we could be. No matter what we chose, we were always pushed to kind of, strive for more. I didn't really ever live in the mainland or continental United States, or really had that United States, like American type of exposure until I moved to DC to take a job straight out of college with diplomatic security at Department of State. And when I was in college, I'll be very honest, I probably had not heard of State Department. I mean, I knew about embassies. I didn't really know the work they did. So a lot of you that already know about foreign policy are already probably ahead of the curve. I had to learn all of that kind of, once I found out that these people were hiring me, I had to do a little bit of research. But I've been here for over 20 years and it's gone incredibly fast. I started when I was very young. Don't try to calculate my age. I've been a security engineering officer now in several countries. My very first assignment was in China, then Greece, then Sweden, and then Pakistan. I've had an incredible career. I'm currently in Washington, D.C. area. I'm in charge of all of the overseas logistics and domestic logistics for all of basically all of our technical security programs. And I'm probably happy to talk a little bit more about the technical security programs later on, since we are hiring, and I'm happy to take questions about that. But back to the panel. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you so much, Damaris. It's good to see you again. I know you're very active in student outreach events, and you did our Hispanic Heritage Month event last year that was internal to Department of State employees, so it's so good to have you back. I am going to now turn to our last and final panelist, Brianna, to tell you about her background.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Brianna May. I am also from Colombia, but my story is a little bit different. My parents were posted there on their second overseas assignment as diplomats, and they adopted me while I was at post. And so at 8 weeks old, I was adopted. I was flown back to the US, and from there until 2015, I hadn't been back to Colombia since. Being in that space as a Diplo kid, I was able to travel the world. I lived in 5 different countries, and I had a great opportunity to experience those different cultures each place I went to. At one point, I told people that I couldn't speak any language, including English, fluently, because I was catching all these other languages, including Greek and Hindi and Chinese at one point. I joined the State Department when I fresh out of college. I had graduated, and then a year later was able to join, and I was lucky enough to join and go to the office, which was my first assignment. And then I went to Bahrain, which is in the Middle East. My third assignment was in Shenyang, China, and then now I'm back in the DC area learning Burmese, where I'll go next to the embassy in Myanmar.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Thank you, Brianna, for joining us. Okay, so I have a couple of questions teed up for our panelists today. We are fortunate enough to have a few virtual interns that have joined the Virtual Federal Student Service Program, and so they have designed some questions for our panelists, things that they were interested in. So I'm going to kick off with a couple of those, and then we'll turn over to questions from the audience. So I hope you students out there are thinking of some things you'd like to ask our amazing panelists. The first question will be for Alberto. Do you think your background connects you to your job in a way that you weren't expecting?
Thanks, Izzy. Surprisingly, I do. Growing up in a Latin household, some of the important things were, the family, the friendship, appreciation of culture and community. One thing that I found, regardless of what country, everyone values very similar things. So I'm able to connect to people regardless of what country I'm in. And I find that allows me to be more effective in my job, get to know the people better, and kind of have that personal relationship with individuals. And when I leave, I'm truly saddened when I leave these countries because I've built that bond and that connection to the country. Yes, I wasn't expecting to be able to assimilate and make that connection so easily in all these countries, regardless of whether it's been now South America, obviously, but even in Asia and in the Middle East.
That's so interesting. Okay, so our next question is for Brianna. What was the greatest factor in your life that motivated your career in DS?
Well, I think it goes without saying that my parents heavily motivated me just by being in my life. Without them adopting me or being placed with them, I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had traveling all over the world, living in Niger and Greece, Singapore, India, I could name them all. Because of that, I was able to experience and immerse myself in cultures that not everyone gets the chance to do. And I was able to surround myself with other people within the State Department who had pride in what they did by promoting and impacting and spreading democracy. And so without my family, I wouldn't be here.
Thank you, Brianna. My next question will be for two of our panelists. Damaris, if you could go first, and then Alberto. How do you think your heritage impacted you and how you navigated your career, and how do you handle some certain situations of diplomacy?
Okay, that's a very loaded question. I think coming from a small island, I spent a lot of time trying to educate people on how having all these different life perspectives brings a lot of value to the workplace. Of course, wanting to educate people where I'm from and educating people on how different cultures see perhaps the same issues and problems that we come across. I think also I myself have a better empathy for other cultures. I think for treating others with respect and dignity. I feel like having grown up as kind of from a place that's not really well seen, not seen a lot, we tend to probably be a little bit prouder of where we are. And so we can probably relate, or at least I can relate to perhaps other cultures where I feel like I see them more. I feel like they're seen by me. I understand where they're coming from. That helps a lot, especially with dealing with locally engaged staff. I think maybe also my upbringing instilled a level of respect for others, probably for elders, as most of us know, we don't talk back to grandma. But also we like to debate a lot. At least I can't speak for others' experiences, but at least where I come from, politics is a sport. And so we're used to debating, deferring dissenting points of view with others. And I feel like that has kind of been the hallmark of my career, to bring up different perspectives, to bring up dissenting points of view in a way that I can bring them across without feeling like people are being attacked for having a different view than I. So again, this all kind of plays into the full diversity, why it's important for us to have differing backgrounds and cultures that represent America within our State Department. Thanks, Izzy.
Alberto, what are your thoughts on the same question?
So first, I'd like to completely agree with Damaris in regards to debating and arguing. I think that's a basic component of the Puerto Rican household. Now to the questions. So when you look at some key elements in our culture, right? Family, community, respect, the importance of that personal relationship and relating to others on kind of that personal, warm basis. These are things that I try to stay true to when I'm overseas and engaging with others. So I try to focus on learning about cultures, learning about the local community, and I begin every interaction with that same approach, the respect, the appreciation for their differences. And this applies to everyone, regardless of their rank or their socioeconomic standing in the community or country that I'm in. That has allowed me to build great relationships with people. And again, it allows me to be more effective in my job. So in regards to the navigation, it impacts how I navigate my career. So I try to seek positions where I can affect change, whether that be creating a sense of community with my team, or improving the lives of my locally engaged staff, or creating opportunities and opening doors for others to come after similar to this panel, I'm very thankful to have the opportunity to be here, share my experience, so others can see, students out there can see how we belong in this space and how we can contribute to diplomacy and to the U.S. Department of State. So I'm just trying to do my part. That's it, Izzy.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. I really like your personal touch on that. Okay, so our next question is for Brianna. And what do you think, Brianna, has been the most moving or touching part of your work with the State Department? How has working in the State Department changed your worldview?
Thank you. I had trouble coming up with the right words with this question because there have been experiences, whether I've as a manager or as an employee or as a person in the State Department trying to impact policy or change. But one thing that stuck out with me was I was part of the team that helped close the consulate in Chengdu. At all of our posts, we have our local staff, and we keep saying local staff, but what that means is we have people that are usually from the country we are posted in, who are employed and have careers with us at the State Department, but work for us at our embassies. And that is their career, that is their job. So they're foreign nationals who work for us, the US government, in their home, usually in their home countries. And they work for us for an entire career, and we heavily rely on them. They are a big part of our job. They usually do more things than we could ever dream of because of the connections that they have, that they've built, that they've created. And so going through a closure with 150 consulate employee or 150 local staff, when we were only given 72 hours to evacuate, to leave the consulate, was very, very humbling and very, very touching. One of the things that really struck me was, like I said, they're working for the US government. They have no loyalty to us other than their own personal pride and that they want to do the best that they can in their job and in their field, because a lot of them are very specific to their field. And it was very kind and nice to see that even though they knew they were going to lose their job. They had just been told the Chinese government wasn't going to let us have our consulate. They knew that 3 days from then, they were going to be sitting at home, but they stuck out and stayed with us and helped close our facility down with pride and even though there were lots of tears, there was a lot of smiles because they knew that they could reach out to their former colleagues, their former bosses at different posts, and know that we all had each other for support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so our next question will be for 3 of the panelists. Let's start with Damaris, and then we'll go on to Maria and then Brianna again. What do you think students should consider when they're deciding on their career path? What do you suggest they study in college or even postgraduate programs to prepare for a career in diplomatic security? And what did you learn in school that you found most helpful? Damaris, I know your path is a little different since you're a security engineering officer. Let's start with you first. Damaris, I cannot hear you. If you could please unmute.
Sorry about that. Yes, I am very biased when it comes to studies. I would recommend everybody just quit your foreign policy studies now and switch to engineering because it's that easy, right? So definitely as a security engineering officer, when we recruit for students and when we're looking for students to come and apply for our programs, we're looking for those that are in engineering disciplines that it tends to be heavy in electronics. So I personally am a chemical engineer. I had to learn a lot of things that I wasn't familiar with, but being in an engineering background, it helped because we do a little bit of everything. We're kind of jack of all trades. But also those that are studying physics, especially those that are studying physics that would apply to electronics, that's a very strong field as well for our career path. Security engineers, I don't know if you heard Alberto talk about what our skill code does, but we basically, if it's technical, we do it. So it's not a boring job whatsoever. It's different every time. A lot of times you end up learning a lot on the spot. And so there's a lot, you mentioned a little bit about what I learned in college that became useful. And that was definitely, that's one of them. I think that self-motivation is extremely important. The Foreign Service, in my experience, is not the type of job where you get a list of tasks or a lot of directions. And sometimes, you end up in charge of a program you don't know very much about. So again, being able to self-educate yourself and not rely on others to give you that direction is extremely important. And not just for this job, but for others, but especially in the Foreign Service, when you are in another country and there isn't a big, let's say, a lot of upper management that understands what you do. Sometimes you're the only engineer at that post, and so you don't really have other colleagues you can turn to. You have to reach out, find information yourself. Adjusting well to change is something that I think, the constant changing of directions and focus and, focusing on this subject and now on that subject, that became very, very helpful in the Foreign Service, because I think the only constant in the Foreign Service is change. Just when you feel you've unpacked your last box, 2 or 3 years later, it's time to pack up and move again. It's almost like having a different job every 2-3 years, except that you don't have to update your paycheck, right? Your paycheck direction, and you don't have to change your email. It's a different job every time you get a new assignment. Even though the skill code is the same, the things that you focus on in China are not the same things that you're going to focus on in, say, Sweden. Very different, or even Pakistan, right? They're very different focuses, very different technology. And so you're constantly moving from technology to technology. So again, adjusting to change, and again, self-motivation are things that are extremely important to harvest while you're still moldable and not, set in your ways yet. Thank you, Izzy.
Okay, Maria, what are your thoughts on college career paths and anything that you could recommend to our students?
Thank you, Izzy. Yes, so I think being a special agent really is not as specific as to what Damaris was just alluding to with engineering, but you do need a well-rounded person, I think, in either, as she alluded to, all the different changes and the different perspectives that you would need based on the country that you go to. With being a special agent, I would say that you choose your career path based on something that interests you. Find your passion. You're going to do best when you're studying and learning about something that interests you and motivates you and inspires you to do more and to learn more. So I would say take different classes. Take classes that you think may not interest you. You only have that one class to take, and then you'll learn that maybe that's not where your interest lies. And then, so really expand your knowledge and expand your horizons by taking different classes. Secondly, I know that there's a lot of interest with diplomatic security and or Department of State for international relations and political science. And in that, I would say, of course, absolutely take those classes, because those will expose you to the different, to the career path that obviously interests you. But don't be afraid to take those outlying courses that may not have any relation to any sort of international policy or any type of politics or political science classes. So I would say definitely, learn different languages if that interests you, or at least expose yourself to a different language at least once. So that's the second thing. And finally, I think most importantly are those core courses. I think we underestimate the value of basic literature, basic math, basic history. And it's amazing how you can have conversations if you have that knowledge. And now, so many years, 30 years now, outside of high school, I really wish I had paid better attention in high school and college. And I wish I had read more about certain topics, and I wish I had learned more. And so now I'm trying to go back and go, oh, I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to study this, and you don't think about that at that time. But but do it now. Learn as much as you can about that, because that will really set you up in the future to be able to have those conversations. As a police officer, one of the things that I did on the street, or that had to do, is you have to talk to people of different socioeconomic backgrounds and religious backgrounds and ethnicities, and people like yourself and people unlike yourself. And I think Alberto was alluding to some of this when he spoke. And having that experience and having just that knowledge and that education allows you to do that. Alberto also talked a little bit about showing respect. And I think that is so important, to show that respect to others when you're having that conversation. But while you're in college, don't dismiss the importance of being able of learning, and really taking it all in, so that you are able to relate to different people, because you're going to be amazed at the different types of people that you will talk to, and all the amazing things that you learn from people you would never believe if you just take the time to just slow down and learn about the people and have that conversation. And you just also never know how they may benefit you. When you need information, or when you have to find something about, when you have to learn about something, or you're conducting an investigation and you're like, oh, I know who I need to talk to. This person who spoke to me a little bit about whatever topic, will be able to, you can connect with them. And you showed them that respect. You had you showed them decency, and you took the time to really have that conversation, and you can go back to them and find out. So that served me in police work. It served me, while I was a detective, and it definitely serves me as a special agent, whether it's domestically conducting investigations, or doing protection in the United States, or whether it's overseas. And you have to learn something about the language because you're not fluent in whatever language, whatever country you're learning about, or something with an investigation or a case, or even just your own employees, just knowing who to go to. It's just about treating others with respect. And I think that goes a long way. But all that to tie back into the education, really expand your horizons, learn as much as you can, but don't underestimate those core courses. Take them now, do the reading now, and it will serve you later. Thanks, Izzy.
Thanks, Maria. I know that what you're speaking to kind of touches on me a lot, because I've met a lot of agents that have come from interesting backgrounds. I've met one who was a journalist before she became a special agent. So you don't just have to kind of study criminal justice to be effective in this type of field. But also back to your respect question, when I've gone overseas, I went to Bolivia and Lima before the pandemic hit, and kind of meeting people where they are, using your cultural and your emotional intelligence to kind of bridge those gaps between where people are coming from, understanding where they're coming from. That's all very important. I know that, in any college student, kind of taking some of those communications classes and learning how to draw from that expertise is really important. And even the writing classes, they want to write something that's very succinct and pull up a report. Yeah, is also very important.
Absolutely.
Okay, Brianna, any thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, I don't know how much more I have to say because the first two folks just knocked it out of the park. I will say, at least with special agents, I know that engineers and technical specialists have a different field that they need. Any degree is a good degree. I would hate for any of you to feel pressured to take a major or a class that you don't like, which then affects your grades. And then that is what ends up being the reason why you can't join any job, whether it's DS or any other career you'd like. So if that means that you want to major in something that is niche and small and doesn't really, like, when people think, they go, wow, that's different, go for it. As long as you're getting great grades, you're enjoying your time, please. That's the bar is bachelor's degree. It is not bachelor's degree in criminal justice, in forensics, in whatever. I agree with Maria on these basic courses. I definitely think they're both important in general, but also in writing. As I'm learning Burmese, I'm realizing I don't remember half of, like, what is a particle? What is a participle? What is this? But another thing that I really appreciated when I was in college were my elective courses. There was one course called Adventure Games where we were doing rock climbing and ropes courses. And I say that not because it was cool, but it was, but because it gave me an outlet to learn how to trust other people in situations where they're really holding your life, your up 20 feet in the air with just somebody belaying you, and you may not know this person because they're from a different year or they're a different class. The self-defense class that I had, you were learning techniques and skills to be able to be confident with yourself, especially as a woman. In college, you know, campuses can be scary. Campuses can have dark spaces when you're walking to and from the library, and having the confidence to be able to walk around was phenomenal. Any elective that you can, get out of your comfort zone, so that way you can put yourself in a situation where you can test the waters on something you've never done before, learn from it, and then see if you excelled or if you'd want to pull back. The last thing I'd like to mention is that I'm sure most of your colleges have specific dorms that serve specific functions, whether it's like the French dorm for the French language or other dorms. If you're able to immerse yourself in those spaces by applying to live in those spaces, do it, because then you'll be around people that are in a different culture. Maybe you end up loving French food. Maybe you end up learning to speak French on the side. By putting yourself out there, you put yourself in a position to be well-rounded as a human in general. And we are talking about Hispanic Heritage Month, but there's diversity everywhere. And that includes what you want to do as your major, what your interests are, what languages you speak. And so by putting yourself out there, you're making yourself very, very marketable, and you're growing yourself outside of just your schoolwork.
Thank you, Brianna. Okay, so for our next question, I saw that many of the panelists had assignments and were stationed in various countries abroad. How was that experience, and how has your ethnicity or heritage ever made living in countries of differing beliefs and cultures difficult? We'll start with Maria and then move to Damaris and then finally with Alberto. Maria?
Thanks, Izzy. So I think that's an interesting question. I think that it's actually made it easier for me. I feel like I've been, that I benefit from growing up in a multicultural society, not necessarily family, because my family's all from Colombia, but in a multicultural society has given me that view into two different cultures and two different societies and two different languages. And as we all know, language is an expression of culture. It's an expression based on history. And so that's helped me, that's really given me, I believe, an advantage into understanding yet a third or a fourth or a fifth culture. And being able to speak to the people and understand that, okay, well, me as a Colombian, you know, I do this way. As an American, I do this in this manner. And maybe this is why this individual has the perspective based on their culture. So I think a lot about their history and where they come from when I'm in a country. And I try to learn as much as possible when I'm in my assignment. I learn as much about the culture. And if it's allowed, I'm a big runner. I'm an ultra runner. And so I do a lot of running as soon as I'm able to when I arrive in country. And when you walk and when you run, you really get to see, you stop and you look at the different, you know, the streets and the houses and the people, and you get a different perspective when you're in country as to how people live and how they interact, and being out in the parks and seeing the families together. And so that has helped me because I stop and I look and I really take it all in, and that's given me a perspective that's very different. And so I try to really understand the culture. And like I said, I'll read about the country I'm going to understand their history, maybe the wars that they went through, the terrain, and the geography also should give you a perspective as to, you know, what's important to those people, where they come from, why they value certain foods, why they value certain norms and morals and different things like that, that maybe as Americans, or maybe for me as a Colombian, I do not put as much emphasis on. So I think that it's really allowed me to be more open and accepting and understanding maybe, and have not necessarily tolerance, because I don't think that's the appropriate word, but really acceptance of a different culture. And even if it's something that I don't believe in, or maybe it's something that seems contrary to my beliefs, I take the time to stop and understand why it may be important to them, even though I necessarily don't agree with it. So I don't automatically dismiss it, because that's not fair to them and to the culture. So I think it's important to understand that, and that's been beneficial for me. The other thing that's, I think, important for people to understand is that when others pass judgment or discriminate, or there's anger and criticism, that all comes from a place of fear and from insecurities. And so I think that if you just take the time to sit down and to talk to someone and be open, maybe that'll lead for that path of understanding and communication, and you opening yourself up and having those conversations with the people that, the country that you're in, and understanding their beliefs and why they believe that. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but we all have different perspectives based on our backgrounds. So I think it's a matter of stopping and just taking the time to hear them out. But it's been extremely beneficial for me, coming from two different backgrounds, countries, and understanding their culture. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you, Maria. Damaris, what do you have to say about cultural heritage and how it's made living in other countries of differing beliefs and cultures difficult?
I think, again, the empathy and the understanding of other cultures, I think it makes us curious. Maybe I'm just seeing it through my glasses that, I love it when people ask about my country, and I love it when they're curious, and I love it when they ask questions, and I could talk about it for hours and days. And so again, I get curious about certain things that they do. There's sometimes certain hand movements that they might make that are very, and I would ask, like, well, why do you do that? And I think that I think other cultures really enjoy that curiosity. But I think also I am and I think in general, I would say DS is a very male-centric bureau. And so being female, many times, this is the first time when you're overseas that many of these people you interact with have ever seen, say, a female engineer or a female agent or a female law enforcement officer. So again, that might make it a little bit difficult, or either that, or they look at you like you have three eyes, right? There's been a few times when I've had to perhaps assert that I am the one in charge, and that just because I am perhaps the shortest in stature and female doesn't mean that I'm not, the person that they need to be talking to because I'm in charge. And so there has been, I think, some limited difficulty, but I would say that that happens in our culture as well. Sometimes we're very quick to say that other cultures, may be chauvinist or may be a bit prejudiced with minorities. And sometimes we need to look at that in ourselves and see that we have the same issues in the United States. So I think just knowing that I come from that place of being, first of all, being Hispanic, which sometimes, depending on the country you're at, for example, China was a place where I didn't look like what they thought an American looked like, because I didn't look like the movie stars, right, that they were used to seeing. They have a very stereotypical thought of what an American looks like. And so they were very confused. Well, where was I from? And, I had to explain, it's like, well, do you know where Cuba is? Okay, well, like next to, kind of like a few 100 miles away from Cuba, but kind of like the same idea. And it's like, oh, okay, now we understand. But, again, not understanding, I think that Americans come from different backgrounds, and they can be so different, and the experience of growing up can be so different, and it gives you different viewpoints. Sometimes I think that in some countries where it's very, I guess, homogenic, like in China, where there are minorities, but the minorities are not seen necessarily as a strength to the culture, the way we see it. In some countries where people more or less look the same, sometimes it can be very confusing for them. And again, being a female engineer brought some challenges, I think. Now it's just a matter of education, I think. You educate them, it's like, yes, I'm an engineer, and yes, I'm a woman, and, yes. And you take it with, you kind of take it with stride. So it's always an interesting experience. In some countries, you feel like you can just fit in because you kind of have a physical look that kind of goes into the country. For example, places like Greece and the Mediterranean, I could probably fit in very easily, but it's very obvious that I'm not Chinese when I'm in China. And that's something that no matter how well you speak the language, it's never really quite going to be the same. They're never going to quite treat you the same. And sometimes that can feel a little bit alienating. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you, Damaris. Alberto, what are your thoughts on the same question?
So unfortunately, Izzy, I think that, similar to Maria, that my heritage and background has made this lifestyle a bit easier. Keep in mind, Puerto Rican household in New York City, I was surrounded by different cultures and traditions. At home, I spoke salsa. I spoke Spanish, listened to salsa, ate arroz con habichuela. But once I stepped outside, it was hip hop, reggae, bachata, merengue, cumbia. I heard different languages. I tasted a variety of different cuisines. And we embrace these differences. We welcome these differences. We learn from each other. And from a very early age, and because of this, I kind of gained an appreciation and respect for diversity and what it can teach me and what I can learn from it. So I carry this perspective to every country I visit and I live in. And honestly, I find that it makes it better because I don't feel that I am out of place. I just feel that I may be in a different neighborhood in New York City that I've never been to, and it's something for me to explore. So unfortunately, I think it's worked in my benefit, or fortunately.
Alberto, I hope that you are bringing your Hispanic heritage wherever you're going all over the world, and
Siempre.
HHM, yeah, Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations wherever you are, since now you're out in Bogota. I'm going to wait to see what you do next year. Okay, so our next question is, we are going to go to Maria. So Maria, especially for the veteran members, have you faced any hardships that you believed were due to your ethnicity, and how did you find the best way to stand up for yourself, and where did you go to for support, if anywhere?
Thank you, Izzy. So this question, I think, is a bit, there's two sides to it. First on the veteran side, but also on the, sorry about that. So also on the hardship side, and in order to answer that question, I have to tell you that personally, I tend to be an eternal optimist. So my glass is always half full. There's a silver lining to every single cloud. I mean, anybody that asks me about any sort of hardship it's gonna be difficult to find a hardship because I see everything in such a positive light. But I think that really helps me. And I'm more positive in general. But then I really worked hard on being even more positive throughout my life. So I've worked hard. It's not something that has naturally come to me. It's something that I've read books on and that I've really worked hard to understand. And being this positive really helps you embrace other cultures. It helps you embrace people that are different from you. Because like I said earlier, that I think that all of that, the judgment, the discrimination and hatred and anger comes from a place of fear, and it comes from a place of not understanding, and it comes from a place of insecurities. And so all of that ties together when you're able to be more positive and see that there's enough good to go around, right? And so reaching out to people, going back to your question about, I think a part of it talked about who did I go to? I did have some mentors. I know we haven't hit on that, but I did reach out to different people and I talked to them before I even came into diplomatic security, because I was with another federal agency prior, and I wanted to learn and I wanted to see if this was the right place for me. So I interviewed actually several DS special agents and asked them about the job, and sat down and took 30 minutes, an hour to just ask them questions about the position. And that's what I would recommend to the students here as well to learn about it, because you do have, I mean, it's a job interview, except for it's a little bit opposite. They're not interviewing you to see if you're the best fit. You're interviewing them to see if you're the best fit for this job. So I interviewed 3 DS special agents to see if it was the right fit for me. And what I learned was the amount of travel, and understanding that it was the Foreign Service. I just didn't realize how much travel there would be. But I learned a lot from that. And consequentially, that actually turned into an opportunity, because there was mentorship as I went through the process and coming into DS. And so I am able to go back to these people and talk to them about difficulties I've had and hardships, and they understand because they're within DS. But I would not hesitate to recommend that people go out and find mentors that are outside of diplomatic security. I know that after coming to diplomatic security, there's somebody specific I'm thinking about, another DS special agent that I've reached out to, and he's been very welcoming and understanding, and so just sat down to take the time to talk to me about not just career paths, but difficulties I've had. And he's been very honest and not afraid to tell me things that I don't want to hear necessarily, but are the truth and are helpful for me. But you have to be really honest with yourself, and you have to take that time to say, okay, I may not hear what I want, but maybe that's what I need to hear right now. But it also takes that strength and courage for you to go out and seek these people. So not just for diplomatic security, but really in any realm and in any career that you as a student choose. Don't be afraid to go out there and talk to people. And if you find that person that's very negative, you can try and kill them with kindness to be positive, but really see how much they're going to be able to help you. And don't be afraid to distance yourself from that. I think that's important, and we really owe it to ourselves to say, okay, I want to find the positive person that's going to be able to help me, whether it's within diplomatic security or outside of it. But don't be afraid to talk to people, but really take the time to be honest with yourself, and don't be upset when they tell you things that you may not like. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's probably something that you might need to hear, and just be open to thinking about it after the fact, and asking yourself, why did they tell me that, or why did they provide me that advice? But yeah, I would say ask questions, find somebody, within DS that you can talk to and really learn about diplomatic security and all the obstacles and challenges and specific to whatever you might be interested in. Thanks, Izzy.
Thanks, Maria, for taking the time to talk about that. Everything you're saying, as well as what Damaris had said before, being a female in a male-dominated field and being a Latina, perhaps in an organization that doesn't have a lot of Latinos, but it's really great to hear your perspectives on that. And I think it ties in really well for our next question, which I'm going to pivot over to Alberto for. So what do you think is the most, Alberto, okay, so this is coming from one of our viewers. And the viewer asked, with respect to diversity, hiring, and retention, what is the Diplomatic Security Service doing to improve the environment for diversity and inclusion? If you could kind of touch on that, and then I can also round back up at the end of yours, Alberto, because I know I served as the chair of our Diversity Council over the past year, so I can touch on anything you maybe missed. Go ahead. Perfect. That's a great question. Thank you for the student who sent it in. I'm going to refer back to what Mr. Matsu said in the top of the hour in regards to we can always do more. There's always room for improvement. Coming out of the DS recruitment office, one of the things that we have been trying to really focus on is the diversity aspect of qualified candidates. And I can tell you, we've been reaching out to a variety of affinity groups, professional organizations, fraternities, sororities, working with universities and colleges, different orgs, throughout the US. And when we speak of diversity, we don't only speak of ethnicity, race, we speak of geographic diversity, we speak of economic diversity. So we've been really trying to reach out and connect to different qualified candidates throughout the US, regardless of your background, to pull them in, to expose them. I can tell you, growing up in the inner city of New York, I've never heard of DSS before applying.
and I never thought I would work for the federal government. That was just the reality of my environment. With this in mind, we look for opportunities to engage with those communities and those groups of students that may not have been exposed to these type of opportunities before. So again, we've been trying to do as much outreach as possible. There's always room for improvement. If you are part of a organization, part of a school group, part of a university that you feel that you have a good pool of candidates, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to set up a informational to again discuss all the opportunities within State Department. Over to you, Izzy.
Thank you. I will say from a personal note, I'm so excited to see all that our recruitment unit has been doing over the past several years. I attended a couple of our career fairs where they've done virtual, ever since the pandemic, you guys did not miss a beat. You did virtual career fairs left and right. You were on Facebook, Instagram, follow their social media pages if you don't already do so. And your team has just done a phenomenal job kind of keeping up with finding the students where they are and identifying pockets of different diverse backgrounds where you can find qualified candidates. Okay, so our next question, I'm going to pivot to Brianna and Damaris. Can you share an aspect of your roles in DSS that surprised you about the department in general?
Sure. So one thing that surprised me at every post is how much food is the way to bond new people and bring people into the community. Every post I've been to, whether it's in Bahrain or on TDY to Panama, the community, you arrive, you're jet lagged, and basically they go, here's a bunch of food you've never tried before. We would love for you to try it and tell us what you think. We want you to be immersed in our culture. This is the best way we know how, with also letting you be able to eat in solitude while you're dealing with jet lag. And it has been phenomenal because it's a way to get to know your colleagues, get to know their families, get to know the community that you're in, but also be able to share and spread your own culture, whether that be through American food in general or specifically like Colombian food. It's been really surprising how often food plays a part in the way that we can bond with the people that we're living with. Thanks.
Damaris, what do you have thoughts on?
I am going to take a different approach. Being an engineer probably took it as a little bit more literal and analytical. So I'll talk a little bit about the surprises. When I started State Department, like I mentioned, it was my first time really living on I guess, typical American soil. So when I moved here, I realized first of all, I was very surprised that I realized I was only the fourth female engineer hired by DS. This was 20 years ago. We're not talking 40, 50 years ago. So at the time, it was a surprise to me that I was both female and Hispanic. When you grow up and you're surrounded by people who are like you, you don't think about the fact that you're a minority somewhere else. And so I think I was very surprised by that. I was like, oh, I'm Hispanic now. I didn't realize that. But wait a minute, I'm Puerto Rican first. And so there was a lot of, I guess, identity issues. That was very surprising to me. And I think I was also very surprised by the way there was such a divide, I think, amongst, especially amongst the skin color, whereas in most of Hispanic America, we have all spectrums of, we all have family that is very, very dark, very, very light skinned. In my family, we have redheads, blondes, brunettes, we have very curly hair, we have very straight hair. So again, it's like there's a big diversity there, and that here in the United States, that's very divisive. That was one thing that surprised me. The other thing that really surprised me at the State Department is that I never thought I'd pick up languages. I did not see myself as a language person. Being exposed to them when you're living in a country makes it a lot easier to pick it up because it becomes very useful. You really want something that you want from the restaurant, then you quickly learn how to say it properly with the correct pronunciation. Also being a Spanish speaker, I think helped with the pronunciation of a lot of other languages, because I probably understood that there was different ways of saying the same letter. I was very surprised in my job at how hands-on it was. They literally gave me a toolbox and said, go fix that thing. I said, I didn't cover this in basic engineering class. So that was very surprising to me. But again, it was a very pleasant surprise. I got to learn how to use a bunch of tools and work on a bunch of stuff that I had never thought I would. And now I'm the handiest person in my house. The amount of travel. Yeah, State Department, you travel, you live overseas. But most people think like, oh, well, I'm going to go live in Paris and I'll live in Paris for 3 years. Well, for engineers, we're regional. And so we might live in Paris, but we're traveling all over the place. And so I think I just wasn't really, I guess, prepared for the amount of travel that there was and the number of countries I would be exposed to traveling to, depending on the assignment. You could be very well at, one place for 2 or 3 years, or you could be traveling around the whole region for the 2 or 3 years. So again, I think knowing it was State Department, I knew I was going to travel, but not as much as I did. And lastly, I will tell you that I was very surprised at how much getting shocked with electricity really hurt. I have done that a few times, but I've learned my lesson and I now don't get shocked as much. Thank you, Izzy.
Damaris, I'm going to keep you on for this next question because I think this one is an important one that I've heard from several students over the past couple years. So I wanted to ask you kind of a question that's a little bit personal. I've talked to students, like I've said, and we found that our Hispanic and Latinx students sometimes struggle with imposter syndrome. Can you kind of speak to this and perhaps offer some words of encouragement for our students?
This is such a difficult one. It is such a personal struggle and everyone handles it differently. As you know, imposter syndrome is something that happens a lot to very successful women, especially, but not just for successful women. Also, minority women in other areas. It can also happen to men. It happens in relationships and to work. So this is kind of a tricky one. I will say that I think that probably a lot of my imposter syndrome, because yes, I've had it. Of course, I've had it, and sometimes I still feel it. I think a lot of it had to do with we grow up, at least in my culture, we grow up where humility is a very good quality. It's a quality to be aspired to. Unfortunately, when you're trying to explain to people your accomplishments so that you can be promoted to the next grade, you have to sometimes put that humility aside and really, really toot your horn and basically put it out there of everything that you've done. I found that very difficult to get over. I think I felt that, well, was my education in Puerto Rico, was that, I didn't go to, Princeton. I didn't graduate from MIT. Are they going to think that my degree is any less than, their degree? Are they going to think that I somehow, just skated by, And I think that was really the genesis of how I felt. I felt very uncomfortable. I felt like it wasn't really I felt kind of out of place, out of my skin for many years. And I think it took a few years to feel comfortable with myself. I knew my job. I feel at this point, I don't really have to prove to anybody that I'm good at what I do. Remembering your accomplishments is extremely important. If you're looking for that external validation, that's something that you may or may not get. You have to remember sometimes you're only competing with yourself. So first of all, it starts with, did I get into State Department? Did I deserve to get into State Department? Having been on the recruitment side, having participated on the panels that hire students and hire professionals, I can tell you that at least the entrance process in State Department it's extremely structured and very transparent. It's not just the decision of one person. There are very structured questions, especially for DS, especially for the different skill codes. So I then understood, seeing that process, that it was something that I did deserve. I got in because I was the best. I am good at what I do because I have put the effort into it. My degree is just as good as anybody else's because, in fact, I graduated with high honors, right? And so, again, remembering what you've accomplished is really important. It's also about what I see sometimes is some people who are very much crippled by this imposter syndrome. You'll see them working these long hours and putting everything that they have, weekends, and having a very, very poor work-life balance. Sometimes having that work-life balance is what gives you the confidence to get past the imposter syndrome. Because, for example, like Maria, who's an ultra runner, which to me is like, I am so impressed by that. I don't know a lot of people that can do that. But having that achievement in her personal life helps give her the confidence in her professional life. She wouldn't be able to do that, though, if she didn't have that important work-life balance. And sometimes I think we're very afraid to kind of speak up or to draw the line and say, I'm not going to answer that call, or I'm going to put aside answering this email until later because now I'm going to either spend time with my family or I'm going to work on this hobby. So again, I think that it's imposter syndrome is a very, very wide, everybody has a different experience with it. It depends on where you come from. My experience coming from Puerto Rico is very different from our Hispanic colleagues coming from New Mexico, or growing up in California, or even growing up Hispanic in a place where there aren't many Hispanics at all, right? But there really is no one way to break through that imposter syndrome. It requires a lot of your own personal, I think, dedication to really say, I am good at this, and to see your true accomplishments. I'm not an expert, but Izzy, that's at least my perspective.
Thank you so much. It brings me back to 7 years ago when I started as an unpaid intern at the State Department, and I had imposter syndrome left and right. I constantly was looking around like, did they really want me here? Am I the one that they chose to take on this job? And then throughout the 7 years, I was still pinching myself saying, like, how did I get a job here at the State Department? And students come up to me and they're like, I can't believe you made it to where you are. And it kind of just comes back to drawing on that richness and the diversity aspect of it. You know, we all have something that we bring to the table that's different than the person beside us. And even our panelists here today, they all have that strength and where they came from, their cultural background, their heritage. We're all Hispanic or Latinx, but we bring something different to the table, and it makes us stronger diplomats in the foreign policy space and what we're doing today. So we are running closely out of time. I just wanted to throw it out there to any of our panelists if you have any last thoughts before we pivot to the next closing session.
Yes, I'll jump in here, Izzy. First, I would like to say thank you to you, Izzy, for organizing this. And thank you to the students who have logged in and participated and submitted some very good questions. My last thought is, if you are here, if you think you belong here, you belong here. You belong with State Department. There is a home for you. There is a place for you. There is a career for you. So just see what you want to do, and I'm sure you'll find a place here at State Department. And hopefully I get to meet you and cross paths with you in the hallways of State Department. Thank you.
Maria, any closing thoughts for us?
Yes, I think I agree with Alberto. I encourage people to try it out, and I also, I want to jump on Damaris's comments, because I think what she said is so true. It really comes from within. It comes from you. And so I think my suggestion is a suggestion that I received about 25 years ago when I became a police officer, and it was jump in with both feet, right? And don't just jump in with both feet, jump into the deep end of the pool. Those challenges that you fear, those obstacles that you think are obstacles are only going to make you better. And don't stay in the safe side. Go into the area that's dangerous, and I don't mean dangerous in a dangerous safety, security sense, but the area that makes you uncomfortable. Step out of your comfort zone and jump into that deep end of the pool, and you will learn so much, you will grow so much, and it's amazing how much you'll achieve. And that self-satisfaction, that is hopefully what will help you deal with that imposter syndrome, because you will have earned it yourself when you worked hard for it. And that's what I would encourage. I would encourage that you step outside that comfort zone and take those risks, you know, and submit those applications, because if you don't do it, you'll never know. Thank you, Izzy.
Thank you. Brianna, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much to the students for being here. Thank you for having me. I wanted to mention a few things as takeaways. One is to just be yourself. Yes, imposter syndrome is real, but sometimes part of the battle is people don't get the quirks about you, and that's okay. That's okay. Another thing is to be empathetic, leading with empathy in your conversations with other people, having expecting empathy from others when you're talking about the situations you're going through will help you get far regardless of the career that you choose, but definitely within diplomatic security. And as you guys are all in college now, I wanted to remind you that you have so many resources available for you at your school, whether that's the career guidance counselor that's there, whether that's the Center for Diversity, if you have one. And if you want to learn more and you want to get more out of what you're doing in college, use those resources and advocate for yourself, because we are here to show you that we welcome you, we want you here, but you have to want it too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And last but certainly not least, Damaris, any closing thoughts for us?
I would like to say thank you to everyone. Even listening to you, all of the panelists is inspiring to me. I'm not saying I'll be ultra running any marathons yet, but you never know in 2 or 3 years. The students, I would like to tell you this. You've taken the first step. You're here. This is an incredible career. It is something that is unique. There's no other job like it in the world. There really isn't. And we're very proud of you. We're very proud of all of the students. We look forward to working with you and infusing a lot of new blood into our bureau and into our department. So we hope everyone has a great day, and please consider reaching out and getting some more information about diplomatic security and State Department. Thank you.
Thank you so much for our panelists who joined us here today and took time out of their busy schedules to make this impactful commentary for our students. I'd also like to thank our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Carlos Matus, for his participation today. And we have a whole day in store for you. This is not the end. Up next, we're going to have remarks from our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. And when you return from our lunch break, we're going to have remarks from the Principal Deputy Spokesperson before we jump into the class at state sessions this afternoon. So please stay tuned. Everything is going to be recorded. So if you have to pop out for a class and pop back in, feel free to join us later today. I'm really excited because we're going to have an all-star panel this afternoon with some of our Hispanic and Latin diplomats. And then we're closing out with a networking session afterwards where you can ask those honest questions from some State Department employees and get their feedback on what it's like to work at the State Department. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. It is an honor to join you today for the Department of State's inaugural Student Foreign Policy Symposium. I first want to thank the Hispanic Employee Council of Foreign Affairs Agencies, also known as HECFA, and the Bureau of Global Public Affairs for teaming up to organize this important conference. I am Ambassador Gina Abercrombie Winstanley, the Department of State's Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer. When Secretary Blinken appointed me to this position earlier this year, he made clear my mandate is to change the part of the State Department's culture, the norms, behaviors, and biases that stifle diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. The Secretary has said repeatedly that a more inclusive workforce makes our foreign policy stronger, smarter, and more creative. A more diverse diplomatic corps is not just a nice-to-have. It is a national security imperative. Today's symposium is an important step to realizing the Secretary's vision of building a State Department that looks like America, one that includes the rich diversity of Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx communities. Our nation is becoming increasingly diverse. Hispanic or Latino populations are currently the second largest racial or ethnic group. comprising almost 20% of the total U.S. population. So how do we do this? How do we build a department that looks like America? Well, I have a motto that guides my work: intentionality, transparency, and accountability. First, we need to be intentional. The United States is one of the most diverse and powerful nations in the world. Other countries are watching us. When we fail to live up to our ideals, our adversaries are ready to exploit our shortcomings. We need to consistently be asking ourselves, who is not at the table? It needs to be the lens across all of our work. Celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month is an important way to advance diversity and inclusion. But it needs to extend beyond this month. Advancing diversity must be a muscle that is exercised intentionally every single day. Secondly, we need transparency. If we are serious about dismantling systemic inequities, then we also need to be transparent about what we're dismantling. That is why one of my first actions was to launch a diversity data working group. We can't measure progress on efforts to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility if we don't have baselines. And finally, we need accountability. This means strengthening accountability mechanisms to ensure that we have a workplace where all employees feel safe and can realize their full potential. Whether you are a student watching from your dorm room, thinking about a career in foreign policy, or a State Department colleague in a leadership position, we all have a role to play. We, here in Washington, in our regional offices in the United States and across the world at our embassies and consulates, we're looking to the next generation. Some of us began our journey in diplomacy from exactly where you are today, as a student. If you're interested in a career at the State Department, I encourage you to visit careers.state.gov. These are historic times. We're living in a once-in-a-generation pandemic. We're living through the ongoing climate crisis and threats to democracy at home and abroad. We need your skills and talents to solve the complex challenges of the 21st century. Diversity gives us a significant competitive advantage on the world stage, and we need you on our stage. Thank you.